Hello, my dear friends. Today I want to share with you a story that touched my heart so deeply. I just had to tell it. If you've ever wondered if love can heal the deepest wounds, or if a broken family can find joy again, please stay with me. And if this story moves you as much as it moved me, don't forget to leave a comment below. I love hearing from each and every one of you. Now, let me take you to a moment that changed everything. The silence in David Montgomery's mansion was suffocating. Not the peaceful quiet of a home at rest, but the heavy, oppressive silence that had settled over everything since that terrible night 8 months ago. David stood in the doorway of his children's playroom, watching 4-year-old Mason and 3-year-old Emma sit motionless on the carpet, their eyes fixed on nothing. They hadn't spoken a single word since the accident. Not one. "Mr. Montgomery?" His assistant's voice broke through his thoughts. "The new specialist is here." David turned. Exhaustion etched into every line of his 42-year-old face. "Send them away." "Margaret, I can't. Not today." "Sir, this one's different. She insisted on waiting. Says she has a unique approach." He almost laughed. Unique. He'd heard that word from every specialist, therapist, an expert money could buy. The best child psychologists in the world had examined his children. Renowned nutritionists had tried everything to get them to eat solid food again. Nothing worked. Mason and Emma would only consume liquids, smoothies, soups, anything that didn't require chewing. The doctor said it was trauma-related, that the children associated the sound of chewing with the crushing metal and breaking glass from that night. "Fine," David sighed. "Send her to my office." But when he entered his office 5 minutes later, it was empty. Confused, he heard something unusual, a sound he hadn't heard in 8 months. Giggles, children's laughter, faint but unmistakable, coming from the playroom. David rushed back, his heart pounding. There, in the middle of the room, was a young woman dressed in an absolutely ridiculous costume. A shimmering purple dress with wings, a crown made of fake fruits and vegetables, and a wand topped with a carrot. She was sprinkling imaginary dust over his children, who were watching her with something he thought he'd never see again, interest. "Who are you?" David demanded. "What are you doing in my house?" The woman turned, and despite the ridiculous outfit, her eyes were serious and kind. "I'm Sarah Chen, the nutritionist, and right now, I'm the flavor fairy, here to help the very special children remember that eating can be magical. I didn't authorize this. My children don't speak to strangers." "They don't, Daddy." The word was barely a whisper, but it stopped David cold. Emma had spoken. After 8 months of silence, his baby girl had spoken. "The fairy is sparkly," Emma continued, her voice rusty from disuse. David's knees nearly buckled. He gripped the door frame, tears threatening to spill. Sarah gave him a gentle smile and a subtle nod, then turned back to the children. "Now, my little princes and princess, the flavor fairy has a very important question. Do you know what happens when we forget to eat yummy foods?" Mason, still silent, shook his head. "We forget the stories," Sarah said softly. "Every food has a story, and somewhere, in a beautiful place far above the clouds, there's someone who wants you to hear all those stories." David watched in amazement as his children leaned forward, captivated. This strange young woman in a ridiculous costume had achieved more in 5 minutes than months of traditional therapy. "Tomorrow, I'll come back with more stories," Sarah promised. "But only if it's okay with your daddy." 2 pairs of eyes, one blue like their mother's, one brown like his, turned to David with a plea he couldn't refuse. "Yes," he said hoarsely, "please come back." As Sarah gathered her things, she passed close to David. "They're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise you that." "How can you be so sure?" She paused at the door, and for just a moment, he saw something in her eyes, a deep understanding, a shared pain. "Because I've been where they are, and I found my way back." After she left, David found his children holding hands, humming a little tune Sarah had taught them. For the first time since Caroline's death, he dared to hope. Sarah Chen sat in her beat-up Honda Civic outside the Montgomery mansion the next morning, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. What had she been thinking? Promising David Montgomery, the David Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Pharmaceuticals, that she could heal his children. She was 26 years old, fresh out of her nutrition degree, making ends meet by working as a clown at Children's Hospital. On weekends, she wasn't qualified for this, but then she remembered Emma's tiny voice, Mason's eager eyes, and the way her own heart had recognized their pain. She knew that silence. She lived in it for 2 years after watching her mother collapse in their kitchen, her 8-year-old mind connecting the sound of her mother's last breath with the crunch of the apple she'd been eating. Taking a deep breath, Sarah grabbed her duffel bag full of props and headed to the door. Margaret, the assistant, let her in with a warmer smile than yesterday. "They've been asking for you since 6 this morning," Margaret whispered. First time they've shown interest in anything. Sarah found the children in the same spot, but this time David was with them, still in yesterday's rumpled suit. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I stayed here all night," he explained, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "They actually ate some soup last night. First time they've finished a meal in months." Sarah's heart squeezed. This powerful businessman, who probably commanded boardrooms and influenced global markets, had spent the night on his children's floor. Just to be near them, that's wonderful, she said softly, then louder, in her Flavor Fairy voice. "Good morning, my magical friends." Emma clapped her hands. "Fairy, you came back." "Of course I did, and today, I brought something very special." Sarah pulled out a small keyboard. "Today, we're going to learn the music of eating." David raised an eyebrow. "Music?" Sarah met his gaze. "Every sound tells a story, Mr. Montgomery, even the scary ones. We just need to teach them to hear the melody instead of the noise." She sat, cross-legged between the children, and began to play simple notes. "When we bite into an apple," she played a crisp, bright note, "it makes this sound. But do you know what that really is? It's the apple saying hello." Mason tilted his head, processing this. "And when we chew crackers," she played a rhythmic pattern, "they're doing a happy dance in our mouths for the next hour." Sarah transformed every sound associated with eating into a musical adventure. She had them close their eyes and listen as she crunched various foods, matching each sound to a note on the keyboard. Slowly, she introduced the idea that their mommy loved these sounds, that somewhere in heaven, she was smiling every time they ate. "My mommy liked apples," Mason said suddenly, his first words beyond monosyllables. David made a choke sound. Sarah saw him turn away, his shoulders shaking. "Tell me about that," Sarah encouraged gently. She cut them like butterflies for our lunch." "That sounds beautiful. Would you like to try a tiny piece of apple, just to make the hello sound from mommy?" Mason looked terrified, but interested. Sarah pulled out the tiniest sliver of apple she prepared. "Just touch it. With your teeth, make one tiny hello." The room held its breath as Mason took the apple slice. He bit down, the tiniest crunch possible, then his eyes widened. "I did it," he exclaimed. "I said hello." Emma immediately wanted to try. Soon both children were taking microscopic bites, making their hello sounds, while David watched with tears streaming down his face. After the session, as the children napped, exhausted from the emotional breakthrough, David walked Sarah to her car. "How did you know?" he asked. "Traditional therapy says to avoid mentioning Caroline, but you—" "Because avoiding her doesn't make the pain go away," Sarah said. "It just makes them feel like they're not allowed to miss her. Your wife isn't the trauma, Mr. Montgomery. Losing her is." David studied her face. "You mentioned yesterday that you'd been where they are." Sarah's hand went unconsciously to a small scar on her palm. "I was 8. My mother had a brain aneurysm while we were having lunch. I couldn't eat solid food for 2 years. Everyone told me to forget, to move on. But I needed to remember. I needed to find a way to honor her memory without drowning in it." "I'm sorry," David said softly. "Don't be. It led me here." She smiled. "Same time tomorrow." "Sarah, wait." He pulled out his phone. "I need your number, in case they need you." As she drove away, Sarah didn't see David standing in the doorway, watching her go, wondering how this young woman in a Flavor Fairy costume had brought the first light into his dark world. That night, at 2 a.m., her phone rang. David's panicked voice. "Emma's having nightmares. She's asking for the fairy." "I'm so sorry, but could you?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes. She was there in 12. The grandfather clock in the Montgomery mansion chimed 3 a.m. as Sarah cradled Emma in her arms, humming softly while David sat nearby with Mason curled against his chest. The little girl's nightmare had woken the whole house, screams about the crunching metal. That had sent David into a panic. "SHH, sweet girl," Sarah whispered, rocking Emma gently. "Let's change that sound, okay? Close your eyes and help me." What if the metal wasn't crunching? What if it was singing? Metal doesn't sing, Emma whimpered. Oh, but it does. Listen. Sarah pulled out her phone and played a soft wind chime melody. That's metal singing, and sometimes when people we love have to go to heaven, the angels make special music to welcome them. Emma's breathing slowly calmed. Did the angels sing for Mommy? The most beautiful song ever. Sarah assured her, and you know what? Every time you eat something yummy and healthy, Mommy hears that music too. David watched this exchange with a mixture of awe and something else, something that made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with grief. The way Sarah held his daughter, the natural maternal instinct, the patience. Caroline would have loved her. Very. Mason's small voice piped up. Can you stay? Sarah glanced at David, who nodded quickly. Of course, sweetheart. The fairy will stay until all the bad dreams are gone. She settled on the floor between their beds, still in her jeans and t-shirt from rushing over. David brought pillows and a blanket. You don't have to sleep on the floor, he said quietly. There's a guest room. I'm good here, Sarah replied. They need to know I won't disappear. David sat in the rocking chair Caroline used to use, watching as Sarah told the children stories about the dream kitchen, where their mommy was learning to cook special angel food. Does she miss us? Emma asked sleepily. Every single day. But she's so proud of how brave you're being. You know what makes her happiest? When you try new foods and grow big and strong. Within minutes, both children were asleep. David and Sarah sat in the dim light of the nightlight, the silence comfortable between them. Tell me about her, Sarah said softly. Caroline. David's eyes grew distant. She was everything. We met in college. I was this driven pre-med student, and she was an art major who painted the most incredible landscapes. She said I needed more color in my life. He smiled sadly. She was right. She always was. How long were you married? 12 years. We waited to have kids. I was building the company. She was establishing her gallery. Then Mason came along. And Emma. Caroline said our family was her masterpiece. Sarah listened, letting him talk. She understood the need to speak about lost loved ones, to keep them alive through memories. The night of the accident, David continued, his voice breaking. We were coming home from her gallery opening. The kids were with us because the babysitter canceled. A drunk driver ran a red light. Caroline. She turned the wheel to protect the kids' side of the car. The doctor said she died on impact. But the kids, they saw everything, heard everything. She saved them, Sarah whispered, with her last act. Yes, and I've been failing them ever since. 8 months of watching them fade away, and I couldn't. He covered his face with his hands. Sarah rose quietly and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You haven't failed them. You've been grieving too, but they're coming back. David, we're bringing them back. He looked up at her use of his first name, seeing her not as the hired help or the silly flavor fairy, but as the remarkable woman who breached his children's walls in just 2 days. Why are you doing this? He asked. Really, the pay I offered can't be worth sleeping on floors. At 3 a.m. house calls, Sarah was quiet for a moment. When I was 10, after 2 years of barely eating, a volunteer at the hospital dressed up as a pizza superhero and taught me that food could be fun again. He visited me every day for 3 months, never giving up, even when I threw smoothies at him. She smiled at the memory. He saved my life. His name was Mr. Chen, no relation. Despite the shared last name, I took his name legally when I turned 18 to honor him. He died before I could tell him I became a nutritionist because of him. So this is paying it forward. This is paying it back. Every child I help eat again, every family I help heal, is my thank you to him. David stood abruptly and walked to the window, struggling with emotions. When he turned back, his expression was intense. Move in. What? Move in. Temporarily. The guest suite has its own entrance. The kids need consistency. And you shouldn't be driving here at all hours. I'll triple your salary. Sarah shook her head. David, I don't think, please. The word came out raw, desperate. They're eating. They're talking. Emma called you. She called you Mommy yesterday when you weren't listening. I can't lose this progress. Sarah's heart clenched. She looked at the sleeping children, then at their father. This powerful man reduced. They're begging for his children's well-being. Okay, she said quietly. But we maintain professional boundaries. I'm here for Mason and Emma, of course. David agreed quickly, though something flickered in his eyes. Just, thank you. As dawn broke through the windows, Sarah dozed on the floor between the children's beds while David watched over all three of them, wondering when exactly the flavor fairy had become essential to their survival. 2 weeks into Sarah's residency at the Montgomery mansion, a routine had formed that felt dangerously like family. Morning started with Sarah's breakfast symphony. She played different instruments, while the children tried new foods, each bite accompanied by a musical flourish. David had started working from home more often, his laptop abandoned whenever. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. "Daddy, look," Emma exclaimed one Thursday morning, holding up a piece of scrambled egg. "I'm going to make the trumpet sound." David watched as his daughter, who 2 weeks ago would only drink smoothies, took a confident bite of eggs, making exaggerated chewing motions while Sarah played a triumphant note on her toy trumpet. "Magnificent performance, Princess Emma," Sarah declared in her flavor fairy voice. "The breakfast angels are applauding." Mason, not to be outdone, grabbed a piece of whole grain toast. "I want to make the drum sound." As Sarah launched into a drum roll, David caught himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. He gained 5 pounds back. Margaret kept mentioning how gaunt he looked, was sleeping through the night, and had even laughed at a board meeting yesterday, shocking his executives. "Mr. Montgomery," Sarah's voice broke through his thoughts. She dropped the fairy persona, which meant the children were absorbed in their eating. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Concern flashed through him as he followed her to the living room. "Is everything okay? Are the kids, the children, are wonderful," Sarah assured him. "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss. They're progressing faster than I anticipated. Mason ate a full sandwich yesterday, and Emma tried 3 new vegetables. I think it might be time to introduce some peer interaction." David's chest tightened. "You mean you're leaving?" No, not at all. I just think they're ready for a play date. My colleague at the hospital runs a support group for children with eating challenges, very small, very controlled, but the social aspect could." "Sarah." He stepped closer without thinking. "I trust you, whatever you think is best." She looked up at him, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with something unspoken. Then Emma's voice rang out. "Fairy, Mason put banana in his nose." Sarah laughed, breaking the tension. "Duty calls." That afternoon, while the children napped, Sarah was in the playroom organizing her teaching materials when she heard music coming from down the hall. Following the sound, she found a room she'd never entered, Caroline's art studio. David sat at an easel, a paintbrush in his hand, staring at a half-finished landscape. The painting was beautiful, but abandoned, dried paint cracking at the edges. "She was teaching me," he said without turning. "Said I needed a hobby besides work. I haven't touched it since." "It's beautiful," Sarah said softly, entering the room. "The way you've captured the light." Caroline was a good teacher. She was patient. God knows I needed it. I'm all analytical thinking and straight lines, but she saw something in me worth developing. He set down the brush. "I hear her sometimes, telling me to add more yellow, to trust my instincts instead of following rules." Sarah moved closer, studying the painting. "What's stopping you from finishing it?" "Finishing it means accepting she won't see it, or," Sarah said gently, "finishing it means she inspired something that outlasts her physical presence. Art isn't about the audience, David. It's about the expression." He turned to look at her fully. "Is that what you're doing with the kids? Creating something that outlasts trauma?" "I'm helping them build new associations. The old ones will always exist, but we're adding layers. Joy over sadness, music over silence, connection over isolation." "You're remarkable," David said suddenly, then seemed surprised by his own words. "I mean, your methods. They're remarkable." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I should go check on the children. They're sleeping. Margaret's watching them." He stood, moving toward a cabinet. "Would you like to see more of Caroline's work?" I think she'd want someone to appreciate it." For the next hour, David shared his wife's paintings, each with a story. Sarah saw the evolution of Caroline's style, from college experiments to mature masterpieces. But more than that, she saw David's love in how he handled each canvas, heard it in every memory shared. "This one," he said, pulling out a portrait she painted while pregnant with Emma, said she wanted to capture the glow before stretch marks took over. His smile was bittersweet. She glowed until the very end. Sarah studied the self-portrait. Caroline had been beautiful, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "The children have her smile," she observed. And her stubborn streak, David added, though that might be a Montgomery trait too. They were standing close now, the painting between them. Sarah could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. The moment stretched, dangerous and delicate. Mr. Montgomery, Margaret's voice shattered the spell. Mason's awake and asking for Miss Sarah. Sarah stepped back quickly. I should go. Sarah, wait. David caught her arm gently. Thank you for letting me share this. I haven't been able to talk about her without falling apart. But somehow with you, anytime, Sarah whispered, then fled to the safety of the children's room. That night, as she tucked the children in, Emma asked, Fairy, are you going to be our mommy now? Sarah's heart stopped. Oh, sweetheart, I'm your special friend who helps with eating. You had the best mommy in the whole world. But she's in heaven, Mason said matter-of-factly. And you're here, and Daddy smiles when you're here. Does he? Sarah kept her voice neutral. Uh-huh. He was sad all the time before. Now he paints again and laughs and doesn't cry in his office. Sarah tucked them in extra tight that night, her mind spinning. She'd been so focused on the children's healing, she hadn't noticed David's transformation. Or maybe she had noticed and was pretending otherwise. As she passed David's office on the way to her room, she saw him through the cracked door, painting at a portable easel. He brought Caroline's supplies into his workspace. The landscape was coming alive with new colors, vibrant yellows mixed with the original muted tones. He was healing too, and Sarah wasn't sure if that terrified or thrilled her more. The playdate was a disaster. Sarah watched in horror as Mason shrank against the wall of the hospital playroom, while other children with eating challenges played together. Emma had hidden under a table the moment they arrived, and no amount of coaxing could bring her out. It's okay, Dr. Patricia Williams, Sarah's colleague, assured her. First sessions are often difficult, but Sarah saw David's face from across the room, the disappointment, the fear that his children were regressing. He'd taken the afternoon off work for this, had been so hopeful during the drive over. I've got this, Sarah told Patricia, then dropped to her knees by the table where Emma hid. Instead of trying to pull her out, Sarah crawled under with her. Scary, huh? She whispered. Emma nodded, tears streaming. Too many people, too many sounds. What if we made it less scary? What if the Flavor Fairy had a special shield for brave girls? Sarah pulled out a small bottle of lavender spray from her bag. This is Magic Courage Mist. When we spray it, we become brave enough to do hard things. Want to try? Emma considered, then nodded. Sarah sprayed a little mist around them, the calming scent filling their small space. I need more magic, Emma whispered. You know what? I think Mason needs some too. Should we bring him some? Together. They crawled out and over to Mason. David watched in amazement as Sarah managed to create a game out of their fear, turning the social anxiety into a mission to help other scared children. Within minutes, Mason and Emma were sharing the courage mist with a boy named Timothy who was afraid of crunchy foods. She's incredible, Patricia murmured to David. I've never seen anyone handle resistant children quite like that. David couldn't take his eyes off Sarah, who was now leading all the children in a Brave Bites parade around the room. She saved us, he said simply. After the session, the drive home was quiet. The children dozed in their car seats while Sarah stared out the window. Processing the day. You're disappointed, David said softly. They did better than I expected, actually, but I pushed too hard, too fast. I should have. Stop. His voice was firm, but kind. You turned a disaster into a victory. They made friends. They ate snacks with other children. 6 weeks ago, they wouldn't even look at other people. But Emma was so scared, and Mason, Sarah. He reached over and squeezed her hand on the console. You're allowed to not be perfect. Even fairies have off days. The contact sent electricity through her arm. She should pull away. Professional boundaries. But his hand was warm and steady, and she was so tired of being strong alone. They held hands the rest of the way home. That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah found David in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. The counter was a disaster zone of spilled ingredients and smoking pans. What are you doing? She laughed. Trying to make Caroline's famous lasagna. The kids mentioned they missed it, and I thought. He gestured helplessly at the chaos. She made it look so easy. Here, Sarah said, moving to help. Let me show you. My mom taught me her version before. Well, before. They worked side by side, Sarah guiding David through the steps. She showed him how to layer the ingredients, how to season by taste rather than measurement. Their hands brushed as they worked, shoulders bumping in the small space. "You know," David said as they waited for the oven, "I haven't cooked a real meal since she died. Margaret or the chef always. Cooking is about nourishment," Sarah said, "not just physical. When we cook for people we love, we put part of ourselves into it." "Is that what you do when you cook for the kids?" Sarah nodded. "And for you," she added quietly. The admission hung between them. David turned to face her fully, his expression intense. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "David, Daddy," Mason's scream cut through the moment. Both adults ran to the children's room. Finding Mason sitting up in bed, sweating and shaking. "Bad dream," he gasped. "The accident. But you died too, Daddy, and the fairy couldn't find us." David scooped him up while Sarah grabbed Emma, who had also woken. They settled on the floor. The four of them huddled together while Mason's sobs slowly quieted. "I'm right here," David murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." "Promise," Mason demanded. "Promise, and neither is." He glanced at Sarah. "Neither is our fairy, actually," Sarah said. "Making a decision. I think it's time you knew a secret. The flavor fairy is just one of my disguises. Want to know who I really am?" Both children nodded eagerly. "I'm Sarah, just Sarah, and I care about you both very, very much. Even without the wings and sparkles." "Sarah," Emma tested the name. "I like that. But you're still magical, right?" "The magic was inside you all along," Sarah said. "I just helped you find it." The lasagna timer went off, breaking the moment. They all trooped to the kitchen, where David served slightly burnt but made with love lasagna. The children ate without complaint, declaring it almost as good as Mommy's. After dinner, as Sarah cleaned up, she found a note David had left on the counter. "Saturday, 7 p.m. Let Margaret babysit. Let me take you to dinner. Not as the fairy, as Sarah. Please say yes." She held the note with trembling hands. This was crossing the line. But hadn't they already crossed it? Every shared smile, every lingering touch, every moment where they felt more like a family than employer and employee. She found David in his office. "Saturday works," she said simply. His smile lit up the room. "It's a date." As Sarah walked to her room, she touched the scar on her palm, her reminder of loss and resilience. Her mother had always said that the heart finds a way to heal, even when the mind insists it's impossible. Maybe, just maybe, she was right. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth from March in Connecticut. Sarah stood in front of her closet in the guest suite, paralyzed by indecision. She'd been the flavor fairy, the professional nutritionist, the 3 a.m. comfort provider, but tonight, David wanted just Sarah. The problem was, she wasn't sure who that was anymore. A knock at her door interrupted her spiral. "Miss Sarah," Emma's voice called. "Can we come in?" She opened the door to find both children in their pajamas. Mason holding a jewelry box. "Daddy said you're going to dinner," Mason said solemnly. "So we brought you Mommy's special necklace, for luck." Sarah's throat tightened as Emma opened the box, revealing a delicate silver chain with a small compass pendant. "Mommy said it always helps you find your way," Emma explained. "We want you to wear it tonight." "Oh, sweethearts, I couldn't. This is your Mommy's. She would want you to." Mason insisted with 6-year-old certainty. "She liked when people were happy, and you make Daddy happy." Sarah knelt down to their level. "Are you sure you're okay with Daddy and me being friends?" Emma tilted her head. "You're already friends, but tonight you'll be fancy friends, with careful hands." Sarah let them fasten the necklace around her neck. The compass sat perfectly at her collar, its weight both foreign and somehow right. Margaret appeared to collect the children. "Mr. Montgomery is waiting downstairs," she said with a knowing smile. "You look lovely, dear." Sarah had settled on a simple black dress, her hair down for once instead of in the practical ponytail she wore as the fairy. As she descended the stairs, she saw David waiting in the foyer, and her step faltered. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, but it was his expression that stopped her, wonder mixed with something deeper, more dangerous. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "But that's not, you're always beautiful, even in the fairy costume, especially in the fairy costume." "I'm babbling. You're nervous," Sarah observed, charmed by this flustered version of the usually composed CEO, terrified. He admitted, "I haven't done this in 15 years, and the stakes feel high." She finished. "I know." He offered his arm. "Shall we find out if we can talk about something besides the children's eating habits?" The restaurant he'd chosen was intimate, but not ostentatious, a converted farmhouse, with exposed beams and candlelit tables. They were seated in a quiet corner, and for the first few minutes, an awkward silence stretched between them. "This is ridiculous," David finally laughed. "We talk for hours every day about the kids," Sarah pointed out. "Tell me something about David Montgomery that has nothing to do with being a father or a CEO." He considered. "I played violin until college, rather well, actually. Caroline used to joke that I seduced her with Vivaldi." "Why did you stop?" "Med school didn't leave time. For hobbies, then building a company, then life. I haven't touched my violin since Emma was born." "Do you miss it?" "I didn't think I did. But lately," he met her eyes lately, "I'm remembering parts of myself I'd forgotten existed." Their conversation flowed. Naturally after that, Sarah learned that David had wanted to be a doctor before his father's pharmaceutical company pulled him into the business world. He discovered that Sarah painted watercolors and had a secret addiction to terrible reality TV. "The Flavor Fairy watches Love Island," David teased. "The Flavor Fairy needs brain candy after convincing toddlers that broccoli is tree magic," Sarah defended, laughing. As they shared dessert, a chocolate lava cake that Sarah insisted they needed for research, David grew quiet. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "I need to tell you something. About Caroline. About us." He took a breath. "We were having problems before the accident. Nothing serious, just 15 years of marriage, to young kids, careers pulling us in different directions. We'd started couples counseling a month before she died." Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand. "I've been carrying this guilt," he continued, "like I'm betraying her memory by admitting we weren't perfect. And now, feeling what I feel for you, it's complicated by wondering if I'm just transferring emotions or if this is real." "David," Sarah said softly, "you love Caroline. You're allowed to grieve the real marriage you had, not just the idealized version. And you're allowed to heal, to feel again. The kids called you mommy yesterday," he said suddenly, "during breakfast. You didn't hear them, but I did, and instead of pain, I felt relief. Like maybe it's okay for them to have that word again, even if it means someone new." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I never want to replace her. I couldn't. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you, to be Sarah, who saves children with music and magic, who sleeps on floors and makes courage spray in." His voice dropped. "Who's made me remember that life can be beautiful again." The drive home was charged with unspoken possibilities. As David pulled into the garage, he turned to her. "I should check on the kids." "We should check on the kids," Sarah corrected. They found Mason and Emma asleep in Emma's bed, curled together like puppies. On the nightstand was a drawing, stick figures of a man, 2 children, and a woman with wings. At the bottom, in Mason's shaky printing, "Our family," David's hand found Sarah's in the darkness. "They can't spell yet," he whispered, "but they know truth when they feel it." Sarah turned to face him, the compass necklace catching the nightlight's glow. "David, he kissed her, soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. She answered by rising on her tiptoes, deepening the connection. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I'm scared," Sarah admitted. "This could complicate everything. The children's progress, our professional relationship." "I know," David said, "but I'm more scared of letting you go, of missing this chance because the timing isn't perfect." From the bed, Emma stirred. "Daddy, Sarah, you're both here." "We're here, sweetheart," David assured her. "Good," Emma mumbled. Already drifting back to sleep, "Together is better." Sarah and David stood in the doorway, hands linked, watching the children sleep. Tomorrow would bring questions and challenges, but tonight, in this imperfect, healing family, together was indeed better. "Stay," David whispered, "not just for tonight," the word implied, "but for all the nights to come." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." The compass at her throat pointed true north, not to a direction, but to a home she'd never expected to find. 3 months had passed since that first kiss, and the Montgomery household had transformed into something beautifully chaotic. Sarah's official title remained nutritional therapist, but the lines had blurred beyond recognition. She kept her apartment, but rarely visited it, her life seamlessly woven into the fabric of this healing family. "Sarah," Mason called from the kitchen. "Emma's making pancakes fly again." Sarah rushed in to find Emma, now confident and giggly. flipping pancakes with enthusiastic abandon while David tried to dodge the aerial breakfast. Fire dusted his Saturday morning stubble, and his Harvard t-shirt bore syrup battle scars. I see the breakfast acrobatics had begun without me, Sarah laughed, catching a wayward pancake mid-flight. We're making special pancakes for your birthday, Emma announced proudly, then clapped her hands over her mouth. Oops, it was supposed to be a surprise. Sarah's heart melted. She'd mentioned her birthday only once, weeks ago. You remembered? Of course we remembered, David said softly, moving closer. Mason, show her what else we made. Mason proudly presented a lopsided cake, covered in what appeared to be every color of frosting imaginable. We decorated it ourselves. Each color is a feeling. Pink is happy, blue is safe, yellow is tummy growls, Emma finished. Because yellow foods make the best tummy growls, Sarah blinked back tears. These children, who once couldn't eat, now expressed emotions through food colors. The transformation still took her breath away. It's perfect, she whispered, later that afternoon. While the children napped, Sarah found David in Caroline's studio. He'd been painting regularly now. The room no longer a shrine, but a living space where creativity bloomed. I'd have something for you, he said, leading her to a covered canvas. It's not much, but he unveiled a painting of Sarah in her Flavor Fairy costume, surrounded by swirls of music notes and food transforming into butterflies. But it was her face that stopped her heart. He captured not the silly costume, but the joy, the purpose, the love she poured into healing his children. David, she couldn't finish, overwhelmed. You brought color back into our lives. He said simply, I needed to capture that, to show you how we see you. She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and growing love into the connection. When they broke apart, David's expression had shifted to something more serious. Sarah, I need to ask you something. The children's therapist says they're ready for regular school in the fall. They're eating normally, socializing well. Technically, they don't need a nutritional therapist anymore. Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd known this day would come, but had pushed it from her mind. Oh, of course. I understand. I could help transition. No, David interrupted. God, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm not trying to fire you. I'm trying to. He took a deep breath. I'm trying to ask you to stay anyway. Not as their therapist. As whatever we are now, as family. Before Sarah could respond, a crash came from the children's room, followed by crying. They rushed in to find Mason on the floor, clutching his knee, with Emma hovering anxiously. I fell off the bed. Mason sobbed. I was trying to fly like the pancakes. As Sarah cleaned the small scrape and applied a bandage, she noticed David watching from the doorway with an odd expression. What? She asked. You're incredible with them, he said. Natural, like you were meant to be. Daddy, Emma interrupted. Is Sarah our real mommy now? The room went still. It was the question that all been dancing around for weeks. Sarah's hands froze on Mason's bandage. David knelt beside his children. Sarah is Sarah, he said carefully. She loves you both. Very much. At one, he looked at Sarah. I love her too, but you'll always have your first mommy in heaven. Some people are lucky enough to be loved by two mommies, so she's our earth mommy, Mason asked, testing the concept. If that's okay with everyone, David said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Sarah felt the compass necklace warm against her skin. She'd worn it every day since that first date. I would be honored to be your earth mommy, she whispered. The children launched themselves at her, creating a tangle of arms and legs and happy tears. David joined the pile, and for a moment, they were just for people choosing to be family. But even in the joy, Sarah felt a tremor of fear. She'd built walls around her heart after losing her mother. Careful barriers that kept pain at safe distances. Now those walls lay in ruins, demolished by two small children and their father. The vulnerability terrified her. That night, after birthday cake and bedtime stories, Sarah stood on the balcony outside David's bedroom, their bedroom now, though they'd been careful to maintain separate spaces for the children's sake. Second thoughts? David asked, joining her under the stars. Not second thoughts, Sarah said slowly. Just, I've never had this much to lose before. David pulled her close. Neither have I. Not since Caroline. It's terrifying. How do you do it? Risk loving again when you know how much it can hurt. He was quiet for a long moment. Because the alternative is existing. Without really living, the kids taught me that. They could have stayed safe in their silence, eating only liquids, never risking the pain of remembering. But you showed them that joy was worth the risk. You showed me too. Sarah turned in his arms. Promise me something. If anything happens to me, you won't let them retreat again. You'll help them stay open, keep eating, keep singing. Nothing's going to happen to you, David said firmly. Promise me anyway. I promise. But only if you promise the same. If something happens to me, you'll keep being their Earth mommy. You'll keep them in the light. I promise, Sarah whispered. They sealed their promises with a kiss, neither knowing that fate was already writing the next chapter of their story. For now, under the Connecticut stars, they were simply for souls who found each other in the aftermath of loss, creating something new from the broken pieces. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, they were home. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. That had started like any other. Sarah was at the grocery store with the children, letting them pick vegetables for dinner, an activity that still felt miraculous, when her phone rang. David's assistant, Margaret, but her voice was all wrong. Sarah, you need to come to Hartford Hospital. There's been an accident at the construction site. Mr. Montgomery, the world tilted. Sarah gripped the shopping cart, her knuckles white. Is he? He's in surgery. A beam fell. I don't know more. I'm sending a car. Sarah's training kicked in. The same calm that had helped her help the children now kept her functional. She called David's brother Michael, arranged for him to take the kids, and invented a story about Daddy having important work. But we were making him surprise soup. Emma protested. We'll save it for when he comes home, Sarah promised, hating the lie but needing to protect them until she knew more. The hospital waiting room became her world for the next 6 hours. David's parents arrived from Florida, his sister from California. They all knew who Sarah was now, the woman who'd healed their grandchildren, who'd brought their son back to life. David's mother held Sarah's hand through the wait. He's strong, she whispered, and he has so much to live for now. When the surgeon finally emerged, exhaustion lined his face. He's stable. The beam caused significant trauma to his spine. We've repaired what we could, but he paused. There's a chance he may not walk again. We won't know until the swelling goes down. Sarah's legs gave out. David's father caught her, guided her to a chair. All she could think about was David dancing with Emma last week, teaching Mason to ride a bike, chasing them through the yard. When can I see him? She asked. He's sedated, but you can sit with him. Sometimes familiar voices help. David looked small in the hospital bed, machines beeping around him. Sarah took his hand, careful of the four, and began to talk. Hey, you, the kids are making you surprise soup. Emma insisted on putting gummy bears in it because those make everything better. I told her we'd save it for you. Her voice broke. You have to wake up, David. You promised me we'd figure this out together. You can't break promises. She talked until her voice went hoarse, telling him about the Children's Day, about her love, about their future. When exhaustion finally claimed her, she fell asleep holding his hand, the compass necklace pressed between them. She woke to fingers weakly squeezing hers. David, she shot upright to find his eyes open, confused but aware. Oh, thank God. Don't try to move. You're in the hospital. There was an accident. The kids? His voice was raspy but urgent. They're safe. With Michael. They think you're at a work meeting. Can't feel my legs. Fear crept into his voice. Sarah hit the call button, then cupped his face. We're going to get through this. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. The next days blurred together. Tests, consultations, careful hope when sensation returned to his left leg, crushing disappointment when the right remained unresponsive. Sarah juggled hospital visits with maintaining normalcy for the children, who grew increasingly anxious about Daddy's long meeting. On day 4, David made the decision. Bring them. They need to know. We promise no more hiding from hard truths. Sarah prepared them carefully, explaining that Daddy had been hurt but was getting better. When they entered his room, Emma climbed immediately onto the bed, careful of the equipment. Does it hurt? She asked, patting his face. Not when you're here, David said honestly. Mason hung back, processing. Then, can you not walk? Like Christopher Reeve, leave it to her brilliant boy to make connections. Maybe, David admitted. The doctors aren't sure yet. That's okay, Mason decided. We can get you a really fast wheelchair, with rockets or sparkles, Emma added. Sparkles make everything better. David met Sarah's eyes over their heads, and she saw the moment he decided to fight. Not just for himself, but for them. The next weeks were grueling. Physical therapy that left David drenched in sweat and frustration. Moments of hope when his right foot twitched. Setbacks when progress stalled. Through it all, Sarah coordinated, cared like a general, therapists, doctors, specialists, while maintaining the children's routines and emotional stability. "You should go home," David told her one particularly bad night. "Get real rest. The kids need you strong." "We're not going anywhere," Sarah said firmly. "Remember, together is better." Slowly, miraculously, sensation returned. First toes, then ankle, then, on a Thursday morning 6 weeks after the accident, David stood with a walker. Taking his first shaky step, Mason and Emma cheered like he'd won the Olympics. Sarah cried openly, not caring who saw. David just grinned, sweat pouring down his face. See, he panicked, can't keep a Montgomery down. That night, approved for his first home visit, David sat at their kitchen table while the children presented the surprise soup they'd been perfecting for weeks. It was terrible, an unholy mixture of vegetables, pasta, and yes, gummy bears. David ate every bite. "Best soup ever," he declared, pulling them close. After the children were asleep, Sarah helped David to their bedroom. He was still weak, still facing months of therapy, but he was home. "You saved me," he said quietly. "The doctor said having someone talking to me, giving me reasons to fight. You saved me, Sarah. You saved yourself. I just reminded you what you were fighting for. Marry me." The words hung in the air. Sarah stared at him. "David, I know the timing is insane. I know I'm literally broken right now. But almost losing everything taught me something. Life is too short to wait for perfect moments." He reached for her hand. "You're already there, Earth Mommy. You're already my partner. Let's make it official. Let's be a family in every way." Sarah thought about her mother, about loss, about the risk of loving completely. Then she thought about Mason's laugh, Emma's hugs, David's eyes when he looked at her. Double quotes, yes. She whispered, yes to all of it. They were married 2 months later. In the backyard, David standing on his own for the ceremony. Mason carried the rings while Emma threw flower petals with wild abandon. The compass necklace caught the light as Sarah said her vows, pointing to her true north, this perfectly imperfect family that had taught her that love was always worth the risk. The wedding photos covered the mantel now, David standing proud, despite the hidden leg brace, Sarah radiant in Sybil white, the children grinning with gap-toothed joy. 6 months had passed since they'd said "I do" in the backyard, and life had settled into a new rhythm. David worked from home more often, his legs growing stronger daily. The children thrived in kindergarten and first grade, their trauma a distant echo replaced by normal childhood concerns. Sarah was in the kitchen one October morning, packing lunches when a wave of dizziness hit. She gripped the counter, waiting for it to pass. "You okay?" David asked, entering with his coffee. He moved without the walker now, just a slight limp betraying his ordeal. "Fine, just moved fast." But even as she said it, she did the mental math. Her period was late, very late, between David's recovery and the kids starting school. She hadn't noticed. "Sarah," David's voice held concern, "you just went pale." I think I need to run to the pharmacy." Understanding dawned in his eyes. Oh, should I? Do you want me to come?" "No. Get the kids ready. I'll be back." 20 minutes later, she stared at 3 positive tests lined up on the bathroom counter. Pregnant. The word bounced around her mind, bringing equal parts joy and terror. They talked about more children someday, but someday felt theoretical. This was real. "Sarah." David knocked. "The kids are on the bus. Can I come in?" She opened the door wordlessly, gesturing to the tests. David's face went through a symphony of emotions before landing on pure wonder. "Really, really." He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet despite his still healing body. "We're having a baby. The kids," Sarah started, "will be thrilled. Mason's been asking when he gets to be a big brother like his friend Tommy." But doubt crept in that night as Sarah lay awake. She touched her still flat stomach, thinking about her mother. Her pregnancy had been perfect until the day it wasn't. The aneurysm that stole her had been growing even as Sarah grew within her. "Talk to me," David said in the darkness. "I can hear you thinking. What if something happens? What if I'm like her? What if? Then we'll handle it, just like we handled my accident. Together." He placed his hand over hers on her stomach. But, Sarah, we can't live in fear of what-ifs. You taught me that. The next morning, they told the children over breakfast. Emma shrieked with delight while Mason turned thoughtful. Will the baby like our food music? He asked. I'm sure they will. Sarah assured him. You two can teach them all about it. We're the experts, Emma agreed proudly. We'll show the baby that carrots are really orange smiles. As the weeks passed, Sarah's pregnancy progressed normally. The children talked constantly to her growing belly, Mason explaining addition while Emma sang the food songs Sarah had taught them. David documented everything, his artistic eye capturing the beauty of their expanding family. But at the 20-week ultrasound, everything changed. I need to get the doctor, the technician said, her cheerful demeanor shifting. Sarah's hand found David's, crushing it. Not again. Not now. Dr. Martinez entered, studied the screen, then turned to them with a careful expression. The baby looks healthy, she started, and Sarah breathed again. But we're seeing some unusual activity in your brain scan, Mrs. Montgomery. It might be nothing. Pregnancy can cause various changes, but given your family history, the word hung unspoken, aneurysm, we'll need to do an MRI to be sure. Dr. Martinez continued, if there is an issue, we'll monitor carefully. Many women with small aneurysms have successful pregnancies. The ride home was silent. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah broke down. This is how it starts, she sobbed. This is exactly what happened to her. She was healthy, happy, pregnant, then gone. David held her through the storm, his own tears falling. We don't know anything yet, and medicine has advanced 20 years since your mom. We have options she didn't. The MRI showed a small aneurysm, likely congenital, currently stable. The doctors were optimistic but cautious. Stress and blood pressure changes during delivery could cause problems. They monitor closely, plan for a controlled C-section. Have neurosurgery on standby. You could terminate. Dr. Martinez said gently, reduce the risk. Sarah's hand went protectively to her belly where the baby, a girl, they learned, somersaulted. No, she's worth the risk. Then we'll do everything to keep you both safe, the doctor promised. They didn't tell the children about the danger, but kids are perceptive. Mason started bringing Sarah breakfast in bed. Emma drew endless pictures of mommy and baby sister being strong. You're scared, Mason said one evening, curling up beside her. A little, Sarah admitted. That's okay. Remember the courage spray. We can make some for you. I like that. As her due date approached, Sarah wrote letters, just in case. One for David, one for each child, one for the daughter she might not meet. She hid them in Caroline's art studio, hoping they'd never be found. The night before the scheduled C-section, the whole family piled into the master bed. David told stories about brave princesses while the children added sound effects. The baby kicked and rolled, already part of their symphony. Tomorrow you meet her, Sarah told Mason and Emma, your baby sister, and you'll be okay? Emma asked, that too wise look in her eyes. I'll do my very best, Sarah promised, and I have the best reason to fight. Getting back to all of you. David's arms tightened around her that night, neither of them sleeping. They'd faced his potential paralysis, conquered childhood trauma, built a family from broken pieces. Tomorrow would bring their greatest test yet. No matter what happens, Sarah whispered, this has been worth it, all of it. Stop talking like that, David said fiercely. You're going to be fine. You're going to hold our daughter and watch her grow and teach her that broccoli is tree magic. That's an order. Sarah smiled through her tears. Yes, sir. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Sarah touched the compass necklace one more time. It had guided her this far. She had to trust it. Would bring her home? The operating room buzzed with controlled chaos, double the usual staff for a C-section. Sarah lay on the table, the drape blocking her view, but not her awareness of the neurosurgeon standing by. David sat beside her head, their hands intertwined, both trying to project calm for the other. You're doing great, Dr. Martinez said. Baby's heart rate is perfect. Your vitals are stable. We're going to take this nice and slow. Sarah focused on David's eyes, brown and steady and full of love. Tell me about her name again, she said, needing distraction. Hope Caroline Montgomery. David recited, because she's our hope for the future, and she'll carry Caroline's spirit of joy. Beautiful, Sarah whispered, then gasped as she felt the strange tugging sensation of the surgery beginning. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, a cry, fierce and strong and perfect. "She's here," Dr. Martinez announced, "and she's got opinions about it." They brought hope to Sarah for a moment, red-faced, squalling, absolutely perfect. Sarah touched her daughter's cheek with trembling fingers. "Hello, sweet girl. I'm your mommy. Your Earth mommy." Then the anesthesiologist's voice, carefully neutral, blood pressure spiking. Sarah saw David's face change, saw him trying not to panic. The neurosurgeon moved closer. "Sarah, I need you to stay calm," Dr. Martinez said. "We're seeing some changes. We're going to put you under general anesthesia. As a precaution, the baby is perfect. David will take her. You just focus on staying relaxed." The last thing Sarah saw was David's face as they handed him their daughter. "I love you." He mouthed, "Love you too," she whispered as darkness claimed her. Sarah woke to beeping machines and afternoon sunlight. Her head hurt, but she was alive. Alive. She tried to sit up, desperate to know. "Easy," David's voice, thick with exhaustion and relief. "You're okay. Everything's okay." He was there, holding hope against his chest, their daughter contentedly sleeping. Behind him, Mason and Emma peered around the doorway with David's mother, Mommy. Emma burst in, followed by Mason. "You sleep forever. Sorry, baby, but I'm awake now. The doctor fixed the bubble in your brain," Mason explained seriously. "Like fixing a balloon before it pops." Sarah looked at David questioningly. He nodded, tears flowing freely. "The aneurysm started to expand during delivery. They caught it in time, coiled it. You're going to be fine. Both my girls are going to be fine." The children climbed carefully onto the bed while David placed hope in Sarah's arms, her daughter's. Eyes open, David's brown, but with Sarah's determined set to them. "She's been waiting for you," David said. "Refused to nurse properly until she could hear your voice. Stubborn like her mama," Sarah murmured, guiding hope to her breast. The baby latched immediately, as if she'd just been waiting for the right moment. "See," Emma said proudly, "Baby Hope knows about waiting for the right person." Just like we did. Over the next days, as Sarah recovered, their room became recovery central. The children did homework while she nursed. David painted, capturing moments, Mason teaching Hope about dinosaurs, Emma demonstrating proper princess waves, Sarah looking radiant despite surgical bandages. "We need a bigger house," David mused one evening. "Hope's going to need her own room eventually, or we could just never leave this one," Sarah suggested. "I quite like having everyone close," but she was joking, mostly. The brush with mortality had left her protective of every moment. She found herself memorizing details, the way Hope's fist curled around her finger, Mason's concentration face when reading to his sister, Emma's elaborate songs about baby toes. 3 weeks later, at Sarah's follow-up, Dr. Martinez delivered the all-clear. The coiling was successful. "With monitoring and medication, you should live a completely normal life. You can even have more children if you choose, though we'd monitor even more closely." "I think we're complete," Sarah said, looking at David, for felt perfect, balanced, whole. That night, their first at home as a family of 5, they maintained the ritual of everyone piling into the master bed for stories. Hope lay in the middle, her siblings flanking her protectively while David read about brave knights and clever princesses. "Daddy," Mason interrupted, "is our family story done now? Since we're all here and nobody's sick." David considered. "I think our story is just beginning a new chapter. What do you think, Sarah?" Sarah looked at her family, the man who'd lost his first love but opened his heart again, the children who'd found their voices through trauma, the baby who'd already fought to be here, and herself, no longer the broken girl afraid of loving. "Too much. I think Mason's right in a way," she said. "The sad, scary parts of our story are done. Now we get to write the happy parts, school plays and scraped knees, and teaching Hope to ride a bike and family vacations and ordinary Tuesday dinners." "That sounds boring," Emma said doubtfully. "The best kind of boring," David assured her. "The kind where everyone stays safe and loved and together. Together is better," Mason agreed. Their family motto died as if in agreement. Hope opened her eyes and blew a milk bubble, making her siblings giggle. Sarah caught David's eye over there. Heads saw her own thoughts reflected. They'd been given a second chance, all of them. A chance to build something beautiful from loss. The compass necklace lay warm against her throat, pointing toward this moment, this family, this life she'd never dared dream of. True north had never been a direction. It had always been home. "I Love you all, Sarah said, meaning it with every fiber of her healing heart. Thank you for teaching me to be brave enough to try again. We learn from the best, David said, kissing her temple. The flavor fairy who taught us that even the scariest things could become beautiful with the right perspective. Outside their window, the October moon rose full and bright, blessing a family who'd learned that love wasn't about avoiding loss. It was about choosing connection despite the risk, and in that choice, they'd found their happily ever after, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. 5 years had passed since Hope's dramatic arrival. The Montgomery house hummed with the chaos of 3 children, Mason, now 11 and obsessed with robotics, Emma, 10 and convinced she'd be the next American Idol, and Hope, 5 and determined to keep up with her siblings in everything. Sarah stood in the kitchen she'd once entered as a costumed stranger, now the heart of this home. She was frosting Hope's birthday cake, an elaborate fairy castle, because her daughter had inherited a love of all things magical. Mom, Emma called from the living room. Hope's drawing on Mason's robot again. I'm decorating it, Hope protested. Robots need sparkles. They need functionality, Mason countered. Sarah smiled, not moving to intervene. They'd work it out. They always did. The siblings who'd once been silent now filled the house with constant chatter, arguments, and laughter. How's the cake coming? David asked, entering from his studio. Paint splattered his shirt. He'd been working on a commission for the Children's Hospital. Almost done, though I'm not sure it'll survive the party. 25-year-olds are basically tiny tornadoes. David wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Remember when you thought they'd never eat cake again? Remember when you thought you'd never walk again? She countered. They stood quietly, listening to their children's voices, grateful for the ordinary miracle of this moment. The doorbell rang, signaling the first party guests. Soon the house filled with kindergarteners, their parents, and cheerful chaos. Sarah noticed David's slight limp was more pronounced. Rain was coming, and his leg always knew first. Go sit, she murmured. I've got this. But David was already hoisting Hope onto his shoulders, leading a parade of children through the house. His recovery had been remarkable, but Sarah knew he still pushed through pain daily. They learned to read each other's signals, to support without hovering. During cake time, as Hope blew out her candles with theatrical flair, Sarah felt a familiar hand slip into hers. Mason, her serious boy, seeking connection in the crowd. You okay, buddy? Just thinking, he said. About before. Do you think Emma and I would have stayed sick if you hadn't come? Sarah pulled him close. I think you would have found your way. But I'm grateful I got to be part of the journey. Me too, he said simply, then brightened. Can I have the corner piece with extra frosting later? After guests had gone and Hope crashed from her sugar high, the family gathered in the living room. It was Saturday night, movie night, and Emma had chosen the Princess Bride again. As you wish, David quoted along with Wesley, making Sarah laugh. Daddy, that's your line to Mommy, Emma giggled. How did you know that? David asked, feigning surprise. Because you say it every time she asks you to do something, Mason pointed out logically. Sarah blushed. She hadn't realized the children had noticed their little reference. How David used the movie line to say I love you in 1,000 small ways. What's a spish? Hope asked sleepily from Sarah's lap. It means Daddy loves Mommy very much, Emma explained with 10-year-old authority. Like how much? Hope persisted. David met Sarah's eyes over their children's heads. More than words can say, more than robots, Mason asked skeptically, more than painting. Emma added, more than everything. David confirmed, except maybe you 3. It's a tie. That's a lot of love, Hope decided, satisfied as the movie played. Sarah found herself thinking about journey that brought them here. The scared nutritionist in a fairy costume, the broken widower, the silent children. None of them the same people anymore, all of them transformed by choosing to heal together. Her phone buzzed, a text from the Children's Hospital, another family with feeding trauma, asking if she could help. Sarah had started consulting part-time, paying forward what Mr. Chan had done for her. What she'd done for Mason and Emma, new family, David asked, reading her expression. 3-year-old twins, house fire, they're associating eating with smoke. Inhalation, sounds like a job for the flavor fairy, Emma said. Can we help? We're experts at being scared and getting better. Sarah looked at David, who nodded. They talked about this, the kids wanting to help others who'd been through trauma. Mason had even created a Brave Bites app prototype for his school science fair. Maybe when they're ready, Sarah agreed. Sometimes big kids who've been through similar things can help little kids see it gets better. Like you helped us, Mason said matter-of-factly. And then we helped Hope when she was scared of solid foods, Emma added. It was true. Hope had gone through her own feeding regression around age 2, but her siblings had been the ones to coax her back, using all of Sarah's techniques with their own creative twists. We're a helping family, Hope announced with 5-year-old certainty. Yes, we are, David agreed, pulling them all closer. Later, after the children were in bed, Sarah and David sat on their bedroom balcony, watching the stars. The same stars they'd wished under during his recovery, during her pregnancy. Through all the moments that had built their life. Any regrets? David asked. Their old ritual. Not one. Sarah answered honestly. You. Only that Caroline couldn't see this. I think she'd be happy that we found each other, that the kids are thriving. Sarah touched the compass necklace, still worn daily. She knows. Somehow, I believe she knows. They sat in comfortable silence, no longer needing words to communicate the depth of their connection. Inside, one of the children coughed. Hope, probably. She'd inherited Sarah's tendency toward spring allergies, without discussion. Both parents rose to check on her dot in Hope's room. They found all 3 children in her bed, Mason reading to his sisters by flashlight, Emma braiding Hope's hair. The tradition of sibling sleepovers had never faded. Everyone okay? Sarah whispered. Hope had a bad dream, Emma explained, about the birthday cake eating her instead of her eating it. So, I'm reading about how digestion works, Mason added. Science makes things less scary. David and Sarah exchanged amused glances. Their children had developed their own coping mechanisms, their own ways of supporting each other. Want us to stay? Sarah offered. We've got it, Emma assured them. We're big kids now. Walking back to their room, David took Sarah's hand. We did good, she agreed. 5 years from now, Mason would get into MIT. Emma would land the lead in the school musical. Hope would start a kindergarten campaign to make sure every kid had a food friend, and Sarah and David would watch it all. Their love deepening with each shared triumph and challenge. But tonight, they simply held each other, listening to the sound of their children's voices down the hall, the most beautiful music they'd ever heard. A symphony of healing, of hope, of home. 10 years later, the Montgomery family gathered in the same backyard where Sarah and David had married. But today, they celebrated Mason's high school graduation. At 18, he stood tall and confident, valedictorian of his class, headed to MIT in the fall to study biomedical engineering. I want to create devices that help kids with medical trauma. He'd explained his college choice, like maybe something that makes hospital food taste better, or machines that don't make scary noises. Sarah stood in the kitchen window, watching her family prepare for the party. David adjusted the banner Emma had painted. Congratulations, Mason, in letters that seemed to dance. Emma, now 17, had inherited both her birth mother's artistic talent and her father's determination. Hope, 12 and all legs and opinions, directed the placement of every decoration with the authority of a tiny general. Mom, are you crying already? Emma asked, entering the kitchen. The party hasn't even started. Happy tears, Sarah assured her, pulling her middle child close. I'm just remembering when Mason couldn't even speak, and now he's giving a graduation speech about food. Of course, Emma laughed. His metaphor about how education is like a balanced meal was so Mason. Through the window, they watched David teaching Hope the proper way to arrange chairs. His limp was barely noticeable now. Years of swimming and physical therapy maintaining his mobility. He caught Sarah's eye through the glass and winked. You, to our disgusting, Emma teased. Still acting like newlyweds. Someday you'll understand, Sarah said, kissing her daughter's head. Doubt it. I'm going to be a famous artist living in a loft in New York. No time for romance. Sarah hid her smile. Emma had been saying the same thing while texting constantly with David Jr. from her art class. Guests began arriving, families who'd become friends through shared struggles. The Jacobsons, whose son had overcome selective mutism after working with Sarah. The Changs, who'd named their daughter Hope after hearing the Montgomery story. Dr. Martinez, now a family friend, who'd saved Sarah's life 13 years ago. Look at our boy, David murmured, joining Sarah as Mason confidently greeted guests. Remember when he hid behind furniture if strangers came over? Now he's student, body president. Sarah marveled. Where did the time go? Mom, Dad. Hope bounded over. Guess what? Mrs. Patterson says I can shadow you at the hospital this summer. I'm going to be a junior flavor fairy. Sarah's consulting practice had grown into a full program at 3 local hospitals. The flavor fairy method was being studied by pediatric nutritionists nationwide. But for Sarah, it remained personal, each child a chance to pay forward the gift she'd been given. That's wonderful, sweetheart, David said, though. Maybe without the wings this time. Wings are essential, Hope declared. Right, Mom? Absolutely essential, Sarah agreed solemnly. As the party progressed, Sarah found herself in Caroline's old studio, now her office. The walls displayed a mixture of Caroline's paintings and David's newer works, including the portrait of Sarah. As the flavor fairy that had started his artistic revival, hiding, David asked, finding her there. Reflecting, she corrected, Do you think she'd be proud, Caroline? David pulled her close. I know she would. You didn't replace her, Sarah. You helped us honor her memory by living fully. That's what she would have wanted. A knock interrupted them. Mason stood in the doorway, looking unusually nervous. Can I talk to you both? They sat on the old couch, the same one where David had first shown Sarah Caroline's paintings. I've been thinking about my graduation speech, Mason began. Everyone expects me to talk about academic achievement or future goals. But I want to talk about second chances, about how a family can break and rebuild stronger, about how the right person at the right time can change everything. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I want to thank you, Mom, Mason continued, publicly, for saving us. I know you always say we saved ourselves, but that's not true. You walked into our lives in a ridiculous fairy costume and refused to give up on us. You loved us before we were lovable. You showed Dad that life could be beautiful again. You gave us hope, literally, Mason. Sarah's voice broke. I've already talked to Emma and Hope. We want to do something. He pulled out a small wrapped box. It's from all of us. Inside lay a silver bracelet with 3 charms, a musical note, a compass, and a butterfly. The music is how you taught us to eat again, Mason explained. The compass is because you helped us find our way, and the butterfly is for transformation. Emma finished, appearing with hope, because that's what you do. You transform fear into courage. Also, butterflies are pretty, Hope added, ever practical. As Sarah fastened the bracelet with shaking hands, she thought about the journey. The frightened nutritionist who'd answered a desperate father's call. The silent children who'd found their voices. The widower who learned to love again. The baby who'd arrived against all odds. Thank you, she whispered, for letting me be part of your story. Our story, David corrected. Always our story. Later, as Mason gave his graduation speech, he did indeed talk about second chances. He spoke eloquently about trauma and healing, about the power of patience and creative solutions. He thanked his teachers, his family, and then, most of all, I want to thank my mom, Sarah Montgomery. 13 years ago, she walked into our lives dressed as the flavor fairy and taught to scared kids that it was safe to eat again. But more than that, she taught us it was safe to love again. She shows up every day for our family, for hundreds of kids in local hospitals. For anyone who needs to remember that healing is possible. Mom, you say we saved ourselves, but the truth is, you saved us first. And then you taught us how to save others. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah ugly cried into David's shoulder while their children beamed. In the crowd, she spotted several families she'd worked with, their once struggling children now thriving. That night, after the guests had gone, the family gathered in the living room, their traditional spot for big moments. The space looked different than 13 years ago, but felt the same, safe, warm, home. So, valedictorian, Emma teased Mason, too cool for family movie night now? Never, Mason said, grabbing the remote. My pick, and I choose, if you say. A documentary about robotics, Hope threatened. The Princess Bride, Mason finished. Because it's about true love and second chances and miracles. Like our family, as the familiar movie played, Sarah looked around at her family. Mason, brilliant and kind, using his gifts to help others. Emma, creative and confident, painting the world in brighter colors. Hope, fearless and fun, carrying her name like a banner. And David, her partner in everything, proof that hearts could expand infinitely as you wish. David whispered in her ear as Wesley spoke the same words on screen. Forever, She whispered back, "Forever." The compass necklace lay warm against her throat, its job complete. It had guided a lost young woman to a grieving family, and together they'd found their way home, not to a place, but to each other. To love that transformed sorrow into joy, silence into song, fear into feast. Outside, the Connecticut stars witnessed another ordinary evening in an extraordinary family. Inside, 5 hearts beat in harmony, bound by choice and strengthened by struggle, living proof that broken things could become beautiful when touched by patient love. The flavor fairy had done her work. Now Sarah Montgomery, wife, mother, healer, sat surrounded by her life's greatest accomplishment, a familyhood. Learned that together, anything was possible, even happily ever after.